Hi everyone, this is Christina Baugh, and you're watching Black Tea News. Hello. Welcome to Black Tea News. I am really happy today to be before you all to talk about a pretty serious subject. So I want you all to share. I'm of the opinion that I don't believe that women are really informed about abortion to the point where they have true informed consent. I have this opinion because you hear stories from women who go into clinics and people will say stories like, oh, we won't feel pain here and etc. So there more malicious sort of blatant lies. But besides that, you can tell by people's arguments and the different debates that they have, like how people will say like, it's a fetus, as if you can't look up the definition and just say that that says a fetus is just an unborn human baby. So, so people keep disassociating themselves with the reality of what the child is in your womb, that it is alive, that it's human. Even the White House, they tried to ask Jen Psaki, does Joe Biden believe that a child is alive at 15 weeks? And she's like, well, if you're asking whether or not he believes in a woman's right to choose, then yes. It's like, no, that wasn't the question, Jen. You totally just skipped over that. So today we're going to be talking about that. I have a guest on today, and I'll introduce her shortly. I'm going to go through a few things today before I get to my very poignant interview, so you have time to let other people know about it. But this is a very good friend of mine, Ronquel Baugh. She goes to my church, and I didn't know the depths of her personal story until she wrote a book. I helped her with it, and I was going through the story, and I'm like, she's really been through a lot, and she's so gracious and brave to come on today to tell her story. But before we get into that, I'm just going to go through like a story of the day, something about COVID, and something that's really wacky that happened the other day, and then I'll get to the serious matter of today. So stick around, go ahead, share this with people. If you're on YouTube, if you're on Facebook, make sure that you are subscribed, especially on YouTube. Get subscribe on there. Facebook, make sure you're liking the page, and go ahead and invite people to watch this. This is a very important topic and discussion, and it's something that we really should be fighting for on all levels, because they're so invested in abortion, but they don't even have the guts to really talk about what happens. They just really talk about the woman's right and her body autonomy and they ignore that there's like two other people involved at least. So, but before we hop into that day, I do want to thank my sponsors. I'm here in the studio again, so Brighter Michigan PAC. I'm so grateful and glad to be here. They do a lot of great work. They're about to do this really big charity event for veterans, and they're just really good people. And so I'm glad to be here on today, and I'm grateful for them, like I said. And if you don't like what I say and you're trying to get me fired or something like that, you can't do that because I don't work for them. It doesn't work like that. Sorry. I am my own boss, but we just have an understanding, and I'm using the studio, and God bless them for it. Hallelujah. Another thing, of course, I would like you guys, if you like this podcast, if you like what I'm doing and you want to support Black Tea News, make sure that you support by going to the website, checking out content that I have there, following me on other platforms. It's pretty much Black Tea News on Facebook, YouTube, TikTok. The only one that's different is on Twitter, which that one is at True Black Tea. And of course, please check out merchandise that I have there, like this cool I Am Not the Victim You're Looking For shirt and other things. I'm not going to go through my whole catalog today, but you can look at and see what I have there. And if you like something, buy something and support it, of course. And if you would like to donate, you can go to blackteenews.com/donate, or you can also follow this little ticker instructions at the bottom to do it through PayPal or Cash App. I appreciate everyone who supports, and I thank you all today for being part of the conversation. So very quickly, I wanted to start doing like memes of the day, but I'm kind of cheating today because I saw this really good comic by by George Alexopoulos. His name is gprime85 on Twitter. He does amazing art. You maybe have seen his creepy Joe Biden book, which we do have. But this is based off of the story of the British influencer who believes he's Korean. So, and he very much loves BTS. If you don't know what BTS is, you're living, I don't know, on a rock in distant outer space or something. But everyone knows what BTS is. I heard Ben Shapiro talk about the story, and he didn't know what K-pop was, I guess, or had to look it up. And I don't know if he downplays it to make himself sound snootier with his classic music and stuff, but I'm just like, how do you not know about the sensation that Korean pop is right now? But anyway, so he's like, I'm finally who I am now, and then, you know, I'm Korean, and then, you know, the stereotypical Korean mom bursts in and starts giving, you know, all these orders and commands about how you're supposed to live your life, and then they're just scared from that point. It really, you know, tells a different story about how people, like, it's fine to admire culture and stuff, but there's some things you can say that you identify. Obviously, this person is now identifying as a Korean person because he loves his pop star so much. But there's still things that you don't obviously have experience with. He'll, you know, perhaps never will have experience with. Just because you say that you are something doesn't mean that you are, which is, you know, hilarious because people are comparing it to the transgenderism. And they're kind of making the case, like, if he can change his ethnicity or believe that he's Korean and identify that way, then how come there's any hoopla about it when people do that all the time with saying, you know, that they're a biological man but they identify as a woman? Well, how can he obviously know what it's like to be a Korean person, but how can a man know what it's like to be a woman? So as far as that goes, he's going and accusing people of, like, how can you say that transracial isn't a thing, but you want to say that you know, that transgenderism is a thing. And I honestly think he makes a good point. I honestly think he makes a compelling point. Because at the end of the day, you don't, and of course they'll say, like, well, gender is different than biology, and it's different than sex, and it's about how you identify. It's like, but how do you know that you feel like a woman because you're not a woman? So I think he gotcha. So if you don't know, he actually had surgery to do his eyes, like slit his eyes, which I also do find a little ironic. I wonder how, like, Koreans feel about it. I guess that's what I'm most, like, curious about. But it is a little ironic because they are, like, the capital of the world as far as, like, surgery. So I don't know. The story's a little funny to me. The story's, like, really funny to me. I'm not gonna spend too much time on it. The other thing I want to talk about before I get into my big subject of the day. I'm sorry if there's a little lag. It looks like it's a little lagging on my part, but I heard today on the radio as I drove one of my sisters to work that Henry Ford is requiring all of its workers to get the vaccine. And not, you know, if you're a doctor, if you're a student, if you are a contractor, that you are required to get it by September the 10th. So they're advising people, if you're taking the 2-shot, to get it as early as possible, which I find that amazing. And I think it's immoral to do forced vaccinations, especially with this. It's emergency used, FDA approved. We're still hearing about different side effects that they have. And I am not an anti-vaxxer. I know plenty of people who are anti-vaxxer. But I guess how the definition is, technically, most people probably are anti-vax because we don't believe in compelled, you know, vaccination, it being forced in this sort of manner. And of course, I guess people can decide whether they're going to keep their job or get vaccinated. But what kind of choice is that? There were some businesses I thought that were trying to back off because you can't sue someone if you have harm with the vaccine. You can't sue someone. I mean, the pharmaceutical companies. Why? I don't, you know, lobbying, I guess, but I think you should be able to. But if you have some kind of harm, you'll get that money from the government. So it's essentially like you're paying yourself if there's some kind of vaccine harm because it's from your tax dollars, because they have, like, a fund set up. So that is a big problem that a lot of anti-vaxxers have. But OSHA, I believe, was trying to say that jobs, if they force you to do it, then they're going to have to, pay if there's some kind of harm. So now we are at this point in time when, they're forcing people to get it, and people have been fighting back, protesting, even in some hospitals. They've been fighting back and not wanting this done. I think it's immoral. I mean, you're hearing about people who are having heart conditions, young people, and there's still stories and studies and stuff coming out, but it's enough to give pause, especially since COVID. And I've had people who've had it very serious, close to death from it. I understand it's no joke for certain people who've suffered from it, but majority of the population have it and recovered. But vast majority of the population had it and were unaware of it and were asymptomatic. And I think the Americans would feel differently if it was something like polio, where it was doing a lot of great harm to kids. But the truth is, most people survive it. So now you're giving people a vaccine where it could potentially cause heart damage to young people. So we just need to back off of this a little bit and not force people to take it. And I think it's immoral. I don't know what other way to say it besides evil, but I don't know if I guess it's close enough to it, but I definitely think this is wrong on Henry Ford's part. And anyone who wants to do it that way. Body autonomy is important. At least people on the left say it is when they try to argue for abortion. But of course, there's another party involved when you talk about that. And of course, everyone is involved when you're talking about a disease that spreads. But anyone who can get it has now had an opportunity to have access to get it. So everyone is assuming their own risk now. Everyone is assuming their own risk. And if you have the vaccine, you're good, right? Like, they tried to make it seem like a little bit when they wanted some more control that maybe that wouldn't be the case, but you're pretty much good if you have it, correct? So why are you trying to bully everyone else? Everyone has the right to make their own sort of risk assessments. So forcing people into this where we're not even sure what all the risk assessments are to this is just absolutely egregious. So let me know what you think. Feel free to write in the comments, but I think it's crazy. I think it's absolutely nutty that they're doing this, and they'll probably have high compliance, I guess, because at the end of the day, some people don't want to be bothered and they just want to go on with their life. But I think even if you were for it, and I know people who had events that they're supposed to go to and have been vaccinated, but the mere fact that people wanted to force it, that they decided to stop supporting it. And they were like protesting. So we got, oh shoot, my mouse is going crazy. I just shut down my broadcast. Oh, it's still there. I'm sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties. I thought it just closed out of my box. I'm so sorry. Glitching a little bit on today. So anyway, that's my soapbox about the vaccines. I don't like forced vaccination. I don't personally plan to get it. I will assume the risk. I know for all of you who might be like, but you're overweight, Christine. I'm aware. I'm obviously aware. I'm aware. Something that I can personally work on. But I've assumed the risk. Everyone has the right to assume the risk and try to build up their immune system, try to build up their health and whatever. But people have to make that assessment. And people can go get it if they want to. It's available. But otherwise, let them be on their way. So anyway, let's go on. I'm going to play this video. I recently worked with someone who told their story about an abortion, and I cut it down a little bit to a short, like 3 minutes, to talk about the cost of abortion. And I thought her story was really good. And she talked about things I hadn't really heard women discuss before. And she talked about how people say, they talk about clump of cells and all this other stuff, how they try to get women to do it, because it is an industry and they do make money. Let's be for real. But in her case, the lie that struck me was, you'll go back to normal. And for her, there never was a normal. And so she worked through it, became a counselor, and talked to other women about some of the effects and the costs of abortion. So I think it's important to have that conversation. That's why we're having it today. So I'm going to play this, and then I'm going to bring on my guest, Ronquel.
One thing's for sure, I never would have thought my decision of having an abortion 40 years ago in Portland, Oregon, would have led me to what I'm doing now. But really what motivates me is the experience of my own journey. Women are still being told today what I was told 40 years ago. I was not told that decision, how that would affect me as a woman, my physical, emotional, and psychological health, my up-and-coming marriage. We made the decision not to allow our firstborn child. That decision as a young, engaged, scared, very uninformed, and falling into, really buying into the lies of those who are, I'll say, peddling the abortion on demand. I bought it hook, line, and sinker. Had no idea how much that would affect the patterns of self-destructive behavior. And all they say is, it's not a baby yet, it's just a blob of tissue. Life can get back to normal again. I was never normal again. The obsessive eating, over-exercising, the alcohol, drug abuse, and then as the years went by, and having children later, the ability to bond with my future children. Probably the most eye-opening was, after 23 years, my husband and I never had discussed that day since that day. But the statistics, divorce rate for those who've experienced abortion are 80% divorce rate. And so by the grace of God, we just celebrated our 40-year anniversary. I don't take that word lightly. By the grace of God. And the prayers of people, there is such a neurobiological connection for us to think that there is none, and that it's no big deal, that there is no consequences, that all of that happening, to ignore it and not to give that full disclosure. Whenever I would pause long enough to really wonder why my life and why I was so emotionally a mess, that any of that had to do with my abortion. By this time, I had 3 kids. I'm going to get emotional, I can tell. I had no idea that my depression and during October had anything to do with my past abortion. And then the birth date, which would have been around the delivery date of my daughter, and Mother's Day. I could not understand. I had a beautiful home, loving husband, 3 children, beautiful children. On the surface, everything looked so good and so wonderful. But oh my gosh, I would find myself crying on Mother's Day. And I didn't understand why. But when I went through that healing recovery group, every single woman had a varied experience that way. I try to get people to just kind of peel back all the political ideology, the narrative, whatever's going on. These are women who are many, like I was myself, suffering in silence. Women should be given full disclosure.
Okay. Today we have Miss Ronquel Baugh. How you doing, Quail?
I am doing great.
Oh, I'm going to turn up your volume because you are so quiet. So, Quail is, she attends my church.
Yes.
And I did not know your story. You said the Lord dealt with you to write a book.
Yes.
And told you to seek me out to help you with it.
Yes.
So I started going through her book, what she had written, and other people had read it to that point. I said, Quell, you have a story, but I'm like, it's like you gave me the Cliff Notes version of your life. But at that point in time, I mean, you mentioned your abortion, but you didn't go into big detail about it. But that was the first time I had learned about that. Mm-hmm. And you had talked about other things on the pulpit about what you've been through, but that was news to me. Yeah. And I thought it was interesting because you definitely have heard me talk about this subject before. I definitely talked about it. When people say, well, someone has have one. Yeah, that's totally true. I never doubted it, but I was surprised.
Yeah.
And so you went back and you finished it, by the way. It is available on Amazon.
Yes.
Go ahead and check that out. Desperation to Faith. That is her book. It's a nice cover, Quill.
Yes, it is.
It is a nice cover. I did that, by the way.
Yes, she did an awesome job. Awesome job.
And you went ahead and you went more in detail in it. And the more detail that I read about it was amazing.
Yeah.
In a sad and terrifying sort of way. So why don't you just kind of, I guess, break down the story a bit?
The story of the time when I had my abortion.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was 17 years old. It was my last year of high school, and I thought that I was in love with the guy, and fornication took place, of course, and afterwards I found out that I was pregnant. And I think when I first found out that I was pregnant, I was about 2.5 months already. And I've always been a very small girl, very small frame. And so, at that time, I didn't really, you couldn't tell. My body didn't show. And so when I first found out, of course, I kind of like freaked out. I'm like, I had to tell my mom, what am I going to do, et cetera, et cetera. I believe at that time my mom didn't even know that I was no longer a virgin. So to come to her and say, I'm 2.5 months pregnant, I couldn't bear to even think about the conversation. So at that time, I learned, I believe during school, they had like a parenthood thing or whatever, and I was informed that I could actually go and get an abortion without my mother's consent.
Oh, that wasn't in the book, girl.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Well, I briefly talked about basically that I had the idea or thought about going to get the abortion without my mother's consent.
Wait, so you learned that you could go do this without her consent at the school?
Yeah.
So the high school, Pontiac Central?
It was Pontiac High School at that time.
Okay.
Yeah.
They put it in your head that you could go get one without.
Yeah, they had like pamphlets of information. It was like a teen health center. That's what it was called at that time. And they helped you, they gave information based upon being able to take care of certain things with or without your parents' consent. And that was one of the things. You would have to, it was like a whole process. You would have to go before a judge privately, speaking with them, letting them know what was your situation, why you wanted to do this, et cetera, et cetera. And then it would be finalized with the judge's decision based upon what you shared with them if they felt it was okay for you to do it. And so I learned the information and everything, but at this time I was still kind of battling back and forth. Do I tell my mom? What do I do? If I do tell my mom, I would like to keep my child, but I wasn't sure, how my mom would feel. But if I keep it from my mom, then I couldn't stay pregnant because eventually, I would show. And so, yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm still floored by that information.
Yeah.
Because from my understanding, because I had a friend who was on a board for Detroit schools, teaching sexual education, and they were supposed to monitor what sort of curriculum was going to be. And she went on there. Actually, it was my friend who we were just on the phone with on our way here. And so her goal of being part of the board was because she didn't want people to teach her daughters weird stuff.
Yeah.
So she was just kind of monitoring and trying to gatekeep and make sure they didn't teach them, a bunch of weird stuff, which they were. They're trying to do a bunch of gender theory and even stuff about strangers touching you. Like they wanted to go from like high school all the way down to kindergarten to talk about that kind of stuff. And so she had to keep pushing back, like, why do you want to do this thing, teach this thing? And so she had to keep reminding them the purpose of this sort of education is supposed to be to prevent pregnancy.
Right.
So when I was in high school and they were doing like sexual education stuff, they like would not even talk about abortion. I was ready to talk about it. I was like, I'm ready to debate or something. But like they're like, we don't talk about it. Like that was their like prerogative. So that was, I mean, I graduated in 2007. So that was some time ago, obviously. And you graduated when?
2011.
So if that's the case, I mean, that's not that far of a gap in time.
Just a few years.
And I was part of that school district, and I ended up graduating from another school district, but it's still like mind-boggling to me that they would still like when I was in high school, they didn't even want to talk about it, and you're in high school and they're like, by FYI, you can get this taken care of without your parents.
Well, it wasn't put out there on the forefront. It was like, you know, you talk to some people and you find out, you know what I'm saying? Like it was a couple different girls that had went through the process already. And so it was kind of like hidden behind closed doors, but the information was still being given. So it wasn't like in the regular school pamphlet, like this is how you get to this. It was like through talking to people, but it was still being given through the school.
Wow.
So, yeah, so that, you know, that was my first process of finding out, you know, that I was pregnant, and, you know, just going through the mindset of like, what is my next step? What do I do? And, you know, I couldn't work myself up to do it. You know, I was just like, I knew I was only 17, but a part of me, you know, I wanted to keep my child. Another part of me just didn't know how the situation would turn out with telling my mother. You know, I didn't want to disappoint her even more than what I felt I already had. And so, you know, that was my thought process at the time. However, eventually, as time went on, I eventually shared with my mother. And by that time, I think I was like about 3 months, or, you know, a little over 3 months. And my mom's like, you know, well, the money that you would spend for an abortion, you should spend for the child, you know, because it was a little under $1,000 to get the abortion. And I just remember me still kind of like toiling, you know, with the decision, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Because at this point, my mom left it up to me. She's like, you know, I mean, you made the mistake. You know, yeah, you came and you shared with me as your mother. I love you. I'm going to love on you. But however, you know, this is the beginning of being an adult. You know, that you have to make, you know, a decision. What do you want to do? And so, you know, I still continue to like toil with it. But then after some time, if I'm being honest, I began to think selfishly, because then it's like, well, only got a few weeks for prom. I got graduation. Maybe if I do this, I can start over, you know, a new life. And maybe this will be a clean slate for me. Maybe this will be a new start for me. And I don't really know how my mom or anyone else, you know, truly felt about it afterwards, because nobody else really, you know, said anything else to me about it. I think because it was more of like a very sensitive subject. You know, it was just kind of like, you know, I'll be there for you. And so me and my mom, we went to the clinic for the procedure and everything. And once we got there, if I'm being completely honest, I don't even remember what all information that they gave or didn't give. It's pretty much kind of like how they do when you have any contract. You know, they put everything in very small, fine print. And so I can't say what all the paperwork said or didn't say. I do remember them just telling me how much it was going to be, that it was a 2-day procedure because of how far I was. They did inform me that I would have to get some type of medication, which was called anesthesia at that time. This medication would, I guess it depending on the dosage, it could make you like fall asleep. However, I learned throughout my experience in the process of receiving the abortion, I did not go to sleep. And, you know, when I went in and, you know, I signed my name and everything, and I decided to, you know, go through with it, the doctors walked me to the back and was like, you know, here, you just, you undress, you put on, it's like a paper robe. And it's like, the doctor will be in at so-and-so time. We'll get started with the procedure. And, while laying there on the table, I'm just kind of still, toiling in my mind. Am I making the right decision? Am I going to regret this? How will I be able to recover after this? Because if I'm being honest, I know for sure they didn't give much information of like what's the effects to your body or even like mentally what you may go through after getting an abortion.
Did they go over how much pain you would be in?
No. It was more or less explained like it would be like a period, but it wasn't. It was
I know
not.
Periods. I can get bad, but man, that like that.
Yeah. So that's how it was explained to me. Like, it was like quick procedure, boom, it's over, you're on your period. That's pretty much from what I can remember, that's how it was explained. And so, but like I said, still while laying there, I was still in my mind trying to, decipher, am I making the right decision? Am I going to regret this? Will I be able to recover after, going through this and, et cetera, just all these different thoughts. And
one thing that struck me when I was like reading it was you talking about how you were lying there thinking about it, having these second thoughts. Mm-hmm. And like one thing that was popping in your brain was like, you spent so much money into it, like invested into it already.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that just kind of struck me so to put like, because I guess one of the main things that people talk about is financial.
Yeah.
Why they decide to have one. And I'm like, obviously that was, if you're like they put them in low income neighborhoods, mm-hmm. and then people pay
all this money.
All this money.
Yeah.
But then to put, I guess, a price on that too, I don't know. It was really dark.
Yeah.
and then just how you're describing it and thinking about it, all the second thoughts, and then the doctor's coming like, "Are you ready?"
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
Like it's like someone I saw a TikTok the other day, and it was about an Amber Alert, and it was like how they think you should act when you have an Amber Alert. So people got the Amber Alert, and everybody just ran out the streets like, "Let's find the kid." And so, because you get an Amber Alert, it's like 3 a.m. and it's like, what is happening?
Yeah, what's going on?
And it's like, what? And so in the comments, everyone was just like, this is funny, but yeah, this is what should happen, which people aren't ready to jump in a car and start looking for a kid, like realistically. But I just had a thought to myself, like, what if we had just some kind of network when someone was about to do this, that there was just some kind of alert for someone who's looking to adopt, because they make adoption so hard and it's so expensive. Like I had some friends who were trying to adopt, and they keep talking about how expensive it was and how much money they want you to have up front. And then it seemed like when they actually found a mother who wanted to give up her child, that the ball got rolling really, really fast. Wow. So people always talk about there's so many babies in the world to adopt. It's like, well, or so many kids. Like a lot of people want babies, and there's a lot of people need a lot of love and foster care. But a lot of people do just want to start from a baby and raise it from there, and they do make it very, very hard to adopt because they want you to have so much money up front. And when people say I don't have enough for a baby, I'm just like, my parents didn't have enough for our babies. We just decided to keep coming.
Yeah,
we kept chugging along. So
to just take care of the responsibility.
But what if happened if someone had just said, "Sweetheart, you're not making the right choice," or "Are you sure you really want to do this?" Or like, you can have a refund, or just like just a little bit more compassion than like. And and I know some people want to go there and get it over and feel like they've but I'm just thinking about the headspace that people are in when they do it, because I mean we're kind of lax and glossed over like the story of the person who impregnated you, but it's like a tumultuous situation and of someone that you really cared for but who didn't care for you. And you talk later in the book about different insecurities in your headspace that stemmed a lot from
that relationship.
That relationship, but that yearning that you had stems from also not having a father in your life too.
Yes.
And how you had to feel it, and I'm getting a little religious on here, but you had to learn to feel that void with Christ. So I just think about the women who are in that position, and if someone could have just like, or if someone had just come to you and just been like, at that one moment when you're just like, am I making the right choice?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think for the people at the clinic, like most people know, it's money for them, you know. They don't think about it as, you know, a human being, or even, you know, the child already being a human being. For them, you know, it's money.
But what about the women, though? Just thinking about, they didn't tell you how much pain you went through, or what kind, you know.
Yeah.
And what strikes me is you said you thought about it like, is this can be my clean slate? And I played that video of that woman who said everything will go back to normal.
Yeah.
And she said life had never been normal.
Yeah.
And something that you just told me yesterday when I said, will you come on my show? You said when you talk about this stuff or hear about this stuff, that your stomach is still like
flipping and turning.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like for years, you know, right after, it was like I could still feel every bit of when I was laying on the table and going through having my abortion. I mean, still right now today, you know, it's hard for me to hear other women even talk about giving birth to a child without my stomach doing flips, because it puts me back in the thought process of when I was in that room. Even after, you know, having the abortion and then becoming pregnant again and miscarrying, and then, you know, my younger sister having a baby. Like, I was scared out of my mind when she was pregnant. I feel like I prayed the hardest while she was pregnant, because I wanted so badly for nothing to happen to her, because I knew what I experienced. So it is something that is traumatizing. And I think for me, I know for sure the only reason why I overcame is because I have God. And, you know, I had people praying for me. You know, I had my grandmother praying for me, my aunt praying for me. I can't even say that my mom wasn't praying for me. I'm sure she probably said, you know, a couple prayers just, you know, concerning the situation. But it was really truly that I had God to help me be where I am today. And even still, you know, though that, you know, God has healed me and brought me through, I still physically go through some of the, you know, trauma from that day. So, you know.
So, what was the procedure like?
Well, when everything got started, you know, like you said, you know, I was laying there on the table. The doctor comes in. He's like, you know, you ready? He's all cheerful and, you know, and everything. And I'm still like sweating bullets in my mind, like this is really about to happen. But I'm like, you know, okay, you know, yeah. And so he begins to explain to me. He's like, you know, he shows me the tools that he's going to use. I think it was just like a regular speculum as far as like opening, you know, the vaginal area. Then it was like some clamps. He was showing me what he was going to use to pull down my cervix. And I mean, the way he talked to me, it was like as if you're teaching a kid about 1, 2, 3s and ABCs. Like, it was no sweat. And I'm just sitting there like, okay, you know, I'm trying to take it all in the midst of the time while I'm laying on the table and my legs, you know, open, you know. And so then eventually they gave me the anesthesia so that I could begin to fall asleep. However, like I said, I became a little drowsy, but I never fell asleep. And so when he waited for a little while for the medicine to kick in, and then he inserted the vaginal speculum to, you know, I guess to be able to actually see inside and everything. And then once he inserted the clamps, I can feel him pulling on my cervix. And it was like every time he clamped, he would like yank down. And I could feel every bit of it every time that he would do it. And I began to like groan, kind of like in agony, like from the pain. And, you know, the nurse was just like, you know, it's okay, you know, the medicine's gonna kick in more or whatever. And you know, and he kept pulling, he kept yanking, he kept pulling. And they're having a full-blown conversation while he's pulling and yanking, and I'm just laying there crying. And then eventually I fell asleep. And so that was the first day of my procedure, because I had to have a 2-day procedure because of how far I was in my pregnancy. And after the first day, from going through those steps, I woke up and like it was a dark room, and it looked like if I'm being honest, maybe like a bunch of like recliner leather seats sitting next to each other, closed off in a dark room. The lights and everything were off, and I wake up and I'm wondering like, where am I? And then I remember, what happened and why I was there. And so I'm thinking, okay, this doesn't look like the area when I first came in, into the clinic. And so I'm trying to figure out, where do they have me? And so I could feel that the medicine was still very much, in my system. But I don't know. I felt like I was kind of in a state of panic. Like, I need to get out of here. I don't know where I'm at or what's going on. And so I began to try to get out of the seat, and I began to walk around. But while I'm walking, even as I just put my foot to the ground, I could feel so much pain in my lower area. And so I'm like walking kind of like bent over, walking to the hallway where I can see light. And once I finally got there, no kidding, it was like I felt like I was in a horror movie. Like, it was just like a long hallway, and I'm just like, I gotta fight to get, to where my mom or somebody is so I can get out of here. And as I'm walking, I'm in pain. I begin to cry all over again, and I'm just walking and walking. And as I finally got close to the door, it was like I could just see like a little square opening of a window, and my mom sees me, and I don't think she was supposed to come back, but at that time, her seeing me in pain and seeing me crying, she didn't care. And it was like, she just ran and bust through, and she grabbed me, and the lady, I guess that was the nurse, she tried to stop her. She said, well, she needs to finish sleeping off the medicine. And my mom's like, no, I'm going to take her home. And so then the doctor came, and he said, well, she has to come back tomorrow because her procedure isn't done. So she needs to come back tomorrow. And my mom's like, that's fine, but I'm taking her out of here. And so, we left. When I got my mom helped me to get in a car. She had a van at the time, so I laid down in the back seat, and I could remember her crying, and I'm sorry. But I could remember my mom crying, and I can remember myself crying still, just thinking about what I had already done. And after some time, because the medicine was still so heavy, I did fall asleep again. And I just think about it now, like, I don't know what my mom's, thoughts was while driving and, seeing her daughter laying there in the back seat, and just, I don't even know maybe what was her thoughts. Maybe I should have said something. Maybe I should have told her, don't do it. We'll get through this together, or whatever. But once we got home, and she woke me up to go into the house to lay back down. She talked to me a little bit, and she just asked me, how did I feel physically? And I told her, I was just in a lot of pain. And so she nurtured me, and she pretty much helped take care of me for the time, because I was still out of it. Like, for the rest of that day, and even the next morning when I had to go back, I felt like I never woke up. But when I did go back the next day, I told them this time, I said, I felt everything from the day before, and my body was in so much pain. And, I could just remember every time when he yanked on my cervix, and I was like, I don't want to feel that. I don't want to feel it again. And so they was like, only thing we can do is increase the dosage of the medicine so that way you will go right to sleep. And so I think my mom ended up having to pay another $100 or $200 even for them to do that. And so they did that. And the next day, they finished the procedure. I can't tell you what happened that day because I was completely out. And then afterwards, I went through the process of, basically my body just physically healing. And they say, you'll only be in pain, for a little while, and, you'll bleed, you'll have a, like a regular period, et cetera, et cetera. But like I said, still right now to this day, my body still is in a way traumatized from that day and feeling the pain of what I felt laying on that table. And so it's like, yeah, I bled, and after maybe close to a month, the pain wasn't as excruciating, but even still after that, I was still in pain, you know, not only just physically, but mentally and spiritually. And so, I don't know, I just, you know, I was talking to Christina when she asked me about coming on and sharing my story, and I told her, I said, I do think a lot of women need to be educated on what truly takes place when you do these type of things. You know, I don't think a lot of women actually know to what degree that you can be, you know, truly like hurt after these things take place. You know, like the lady that I watched the video, and she was saying how, you know, she was informed that her life would go back to normal, and it was like, you know, her life never went back to normal. You know, you still mentally go through thinking about that day. And like I said, even moving forward from then, you know, when I did end up becoming pregnant again, I lost my baby. And I even still from then, like, I've been in fear of whenever it comes time for me to become married and have children. For a long time, I thought to myself, I'm not sure if I'll be able to have kids because of what I've done. I'm not sure if I'll ever be able to hold children and, you know, have a successful pregnancy because of what I've done. And so even in my sister becoming pregnant and having her child, I was still in fear. It wasn't even me. But because it was someone, you know, next to me that I love, I prayed earnestly, God, please don't let anything happen to her carrying her child. And this was her very first pregnancy, you know, never been pregnant before anything. And I know she didn't go through anything that I did, but it was still just a fear that I had from what I done in the past. And so people talk about, you know, they make it seem like it's nothing, you know, like, you go, you have a surgery, you'll be over it. And it's just like, that's not true. It's not true. And so I agreed to come on the show and share my story just to help inform and educate, you know, women understand what they are truly putting their bodies through, not only physically, but like I said, also mentally. If it wasn't for the fact that I began to grow a relationship with God, I'm not sure how everything would have turned out with me after that, you know. And it was like literally, I mean, God's hand was just, you know, still right there with me. That's the only thing I can say, because it was like literally after that situation and, you know, moving forward to becoming pregnant again, you know, I still had fear. I still had, you know, a lot of things that I was going through mentally. But I knew that in me consistently growing my relationship with God and, you know, believing and trusting him, that he would heal me and he would help me to get through. You know, my family members didn't even know I was still going through mentally because of that. My family members didn't know what I was still feeling physically because of that. This may be the first time that they've actually really heard me talk about this story in depth, because some of them didn't want to ask. You know, they didn't. I talked to my friend that lives in Texas. She was my best friend, you know, at the time when we were in high school and everything. And she said when she thought back to that time, it was something that she didn't agree with what I was doing. But she said because of the matter was so sensitive, she really didn't know how to talk to me about it. She really didn't know, you know, what to ask me, what to say. And she was like, I didn't know if I would offend you. She's like, I didn't know if maybe you were in a state of depression. I just didn't know what to say. And so literally just yesterday was the first day me and her has ever had a conversation about it since that day. And I have silently, like the woman said on the video, gone through my suffering mentally, physically, and spiritually from that day by myself, you know, literally just me and God. And I think there's so many other women out there that has gone through this and don't have the courage or the wisdom to, you know, speak about it. Or maybe they have people, you know, like how I had, that were maybe scared or didn't really know how to address the conversation with me, with it being such a sensitive matter. And it's like, it's so many women out there that's suffering and going through this by themselves. And they just need somebody like me or Christina or somebody else that's bold enough, that is willing to sit and talk with them and let them know, like, there's a better decision that you can make. Like, there's something different that you can do about this, instead of allowing yourself to go through the trauma. And not even just only for the woman the child. Like and now I'm 27 years old, and I can think about when I was 17 years old. Yeah, I was selfishly thinking only about myself. I didn't think about the child. I didn't think about, just the fact that my child didn't even ask to be conceived, But now, as an adult, past years after that, I thought about, what would my child look like today? What would my child be today? What was that my only chance of actually being able to have a successful pregnancy? And I took that life. It's so many different things that come through your mind, and it's just like, now today I'm in a place where I'm mature and I can think about it in a perspective of that was something I should have never done. And then, for a long time, I was in guilt and of just, I took another person's life. I didn't think about that child. I didn't think about that baby, And I mean, honestly, like Christina said, I didn't think about even the father or maybe anybody else that, was around. I only thought about myself. And I say that just to say that I know there's a lot of women that has the mindset at that time of being selfish. And you just got to own up to it. Be honest and be truthful in your situation. Like, it's not only you to think about in the situation. There's other lives to think about in a situation like that. And, like I said, I was 17 years old. I was immature and I was selfishly thinking. But there are women that I know of today that are not 17 years old. They're older. And, they have people around them giving them good advice, wisdom, and they still make, these selfish decisions. And so, I don't know, maybe being the first or whatever, but I just would encourage women to truly think about the things that they are doing before getting themselves in situations like that, Like I said, not only for yourself, but also the other people that are a part of the whole situation. So.
Wow. There's just so much there. Another thing that was striking in the book is you said that you just, when you went to sleep, you were just praying that you wouldn't remember or have nightmares about what happened. Mm-hmm. And I think so many women, and we talked about this on the way over, that there's women who are they go so far left on it because they know that they've done because of this, they made whatever choice that they made, so they don't want to deprive other women of making that same choice, even though it might be a mistake. Mm-hmm. But there's some who would just go so far left and will totally just avoid believing what they had was a life. Mm-hmm. And it's so obviously a coping mechanism. Yeah. And when I get into debates about it, and it ends up being with someone who's had one, I don't know why they do. It gets so awkward, and I don't know if they're trying to make me feel so awkward that I just sort of back off. And I'm like, I'm not about to back off. I think I'm trying to save babies here. So, and someone once told me, it was a husband and his wife had one, and so they had like kids later, and so he thought I was just trying to be controlling and control their lives, and I'm like, I'm not. And but he made the case that it was the best decision for their family, and I'm like, how? I don't know how you have that sort of omniscience to know that. I mean, I'm not the one claiming to have that omniscience, right. and literally, took someone else's life into my hands. So I'm like, when you say that, I'm the one who's controlling. I'm not the one who put someone in a life in that situation, and ultimately decided that I guess they were better off not in the world. So that was like the last he spoke of me. And I'm just like, I was kind of flinching, like, I don't want to have to get to this point. And maybe some of you watching are like, gosh, that was cruel. But like,
I mean, the truth is the truth. I was just talking to another young girl sometime before, it makes no sense to me to keep putting yourself in a situation where you can become pregnant, and then every time you're like, oh, well, I'm just going to get an abortion. Like, I mean, it's just so selfishly thinking, and like she said, even with the husband and that family, like, then why do you two keep going about the situation the way that you are? If right now is a time that you don't want to bring another child into this world, find a way, to protect yourselves that you're not doing that. There's other options before even a child comes into the picture. It's selfish, and it is, to me, it's crazy because I can't even understand as a woman giving birth to a child and then say my next one, I'm just going to get rid of it. Like, I don't know. I can't.
When you had your abortion, did they give you a sonogram at any time? Did they allow you to see the baby?
I don't remember. I want to say yes, but I can't really remember because, like I said, afterwards I got pregnant again and I had my miscarriage. So I may be thinking about my child, when I had the miscarriage. I don't remember, so I can't say specifically.
I mean, I would assume probably not because they don't normally do that.
Yeah.
I mean, the doctors will do it because they need it for the procedure, but to have that kind of concept that what you're dealing with is actually life. So, I mean, they don't want you to have that because, like you said, they do want it. At the end of the day, they're like, "Are you ready?
Yeah.
You gotta work for that $1,000 you gave us." You clarified, I mean, you didn't have all the information possible to know everything that you would go through, whether it was a trauma physically, emotionally, definitely physically. That's what strikes me, that you had no concept of what sort of pain you were going to go through.
Yeah.
The thing with the anesthesia, there was a Hayden Christensen movie, guy who played Darth Vader in the Star Wars prequels. You don't really watch movies. But he was in a movie, like an indie movie called Awake, and so he had surgery. Jessica Alba was in it too, and she played his wife. And so there is a phenomenon where anesthesia does not work on you, but it'll look like you're asleep, but you can feel what happens and hear what happens. So that was the premise of the movie, because actually his Jessica Alba was like, they were trying to, I think, ruin the procedure, so he would die on the table, and then she was going to take his money and marry off someone else. I think it was an okay film. I thought it was more interesting than what the critics did, I guess. But so that I don't know if that was a phenomenon or they just didn't give you enough. But that is terrifying to think about. Like every time they yanked, and people have it at 3 months. People usually will have it maybe earlier, I guess now, most of the time. But that's terrifying. But now we live in a culture, like they used to say, safe, legal, and rare. We used to be the motto of like the Democrats. Now it's like anytime, anywhere, any place, any reason. Like in New York, that's what it is. And they lit up like buildings pink to celebrate what they were doing.
Wow.
And in Virginia, the governor there, he was on the radio talking about like children who survive abortion, and it was just kind of like make it comfortable, and like not give it medical care, and it'll die out. But Obama like had the, when he had opportunity to vote whether you would give care to a child who survives abortion, he was like no.
Wow.
So that happened obviously before he was president, which a lot of people didn't know that, and I knew that.
No, I didn't know that.
You're probably too young when the first time around anyway, right?
Yeah.
To vote for him, because
that was what?
It was 2008. Oh yeah. Yeah, because I was 19.
Yeah, I wasn't 17 until 2011. So
yes.
So yeah, it was before my time.
Yeah. So that they have a totally different grasp and model, and I don't understand it other than there's big money in the abortion industry. Now we're at the point where the president, there used to be something called the Hyde Amendment. Well, there's something called the Hyde Amendment where they block your federal your federal dollars from like paying for abortion stuff. And so every time they have a budget, it's in there. So there's other ways around it, obviously.
Right.
That they'll fund these people, but there's supposed to be the Hyde Amendment there. But Joe Biden, when he was running for president, against everyone else who's super leftist in the primaries, he claimed he supported the Hyde Amendment because he's Catholic. But then Twitter, people on the left on Twitter started freaking out like, oh my gosh, Biden is not going to fight for women's rights and stuff. So all of a sudden it's like, I'm not for the Hyde Amendment anymore. Oh, wow. So it was just like flip a switch.
Right.
And so when he was debating Bernie, when it was just the two of them, he's like, well, he made it seem like he only supported the Hyde Amendment because that's what you just had to do to get stuff passed. So instead of it being this like strong religious conviction, it was like, well, you just had to compromise.
Yeah.
So in so many words. so now actually this budget that he's proposed, it doesn't have the Hyde Amendment. So he's already put it in action for taxpayer dollars to go to abortion. So in my opinion, when you can't say my body, my choice if everyone's tax dollars are involved. Yeah. So you're now asking everyone, including men, their opinion when you want someone else's money to pay for that.
Right.
But they don't want to restrict it on any sort of measure and means now. And like I said, they won't even have the conversation about the child itself. It's only a focus on women's rights. And I don't want to belittle people who are in a hard situation and make this. I mean, I like you were in a different sort of headspace. I mean, I still don't believe it's right in any case, basically, except for if your life is legitimately in danger. But for those of you who don't know, if you do have a medical issue, it is usually safer for a woman to just try to induce her into labor.
Yeah.
Because you were 3 months along.
Yeah.
And it was a 2-day procedure.
Yeah.
So because it takes time to prepare the cervix, it's still better if they just induce a labor if they can to save a life. And it's still not the same if a mother and a child, like if you have to prioritize one, I don't consider that like the same thing.
Right.
I mean, I think I would like to personally take the chance, I suppose, but it's not the same thing. But life or death, rape, incest, the things that people like to bring up, extraordinarily rare. In the cases of why people get abortion, they're usually because of convenience. Yeah. And it can feel like the world is crumbling around you, but most people do it because of convenience, whether it's because you want to go to grad school or because you can't afford it, which the money thing is really kind of creepy to me because we went through tough times, and I just can't imagine like one of my siblings not being there to trade it for an easier time. Yeah. So that one really weirds me out. But we don't have honest conversations about what the child is. Yeah. And I wanted to make the case that I don't believe women truly have informed consent because some of the things that you explained, but also you can see it in people's arguments how they refuse to acknowledge it as a living human being.
Oh yeah, yeah. Like I said, I'm in a different place now, not only as a woman, but also a woman of God. And, literally just yesterday when I talked to my friend, I was telling her and I said, because of what I have experienced, I said, I wouldn't care if it was something that was to the extent, and Lord forbid, I thank God I would, it wouldn't be a situation like that. But if it was something so traumatizing to the fact of maybe, a woman has been raped or, or anything of that nature, don't get me wrong. I can understand the headspace of maybe being confused of how to handle it. But the maturity in the situation is knowing and understanding that the child did not ask for the situation either. Just like you didn't ask for it, neither did the child. And me and my friend, and we talked about it, I said, the most positive thing to do in the situation, of course, go through the pregnancy. Afterwards, if you feel that you are still so traumatized that you cannot take care of that child because of what you have been through, there are other options that you can go through to give that child a good life. I don't think that it's fair to just, like I said, be selfish and say, well, because this is my body and I don't want to deal with this situation. I have other things that I want to do. I have other things that, I saw for my life, so I'm going to terminate my pregnancy. It's selfish. It's selfish. I mean, that's the truth. That's the bottom line of it. You may want to say, it was more convenient or whatever you felt would make your situation better. But the underlining of it is being selfish. You're not thinking about anybody else but yourself. And it's wrong. Like I said, I have been through it. I have lived through it. I have experienced it. And I am in a place where I can be honest, and I can be boldly honest to say, at that time, I was being selfish. It was nobody else's decision but mine. Nobody else's decision but mine. I told my mother. She was okay with it. She told me we could spend this money on a child. I still decided to do what I did. And because of that, yes, God has healed me and He's helped me to come through a lot of, what I dealt with in the beginning, with after taking place with that situation. But I still physically go through things just from that day. And so, my selfish actions, that's what later transpired. You know, me still going through the trauma of feeling what I felt that day on the table. Now, I mean, I've heard many of women talk about, you know, different complications and different things that they go through with, you know, having children. And, you know, it's a natural thing. It's a natural thing for a woman's body, you know, to go through. But it's not natural for somebody to go inside of you and yank down your cervix to kill a child. That's not natural. You naturally having a baby, that's what your body was built for. That's what your body was made for. But to give someone the permission to go inside your body and yank down your cervix, and even still, I learned in the midst of it that some doctors have made mistakes and pulled down other organs. Some doctors have made mistakes in, you know, not properly clean, you know, the woman out after, you know, having these procedures. And, you know, you can get an infection, which, you know, later transpires into other things. So it's just like, why take yourself through all of that? Why take your body mentally, physically through all of that, than rather just giving birth to the child? If you feel like you've been through something so bad that you can't take care of that child properly afterwards, there's options that you can go through. And I mean, that's just my honest opinion. And that's not even just being the fact that I'm a woman of God. That's being the fact that I'm a woman and I've experienced going through something so tragic. I would never recommend it to anybody, ever. I would never advise anybody to do it, ever. Because of what I have experienced, because of what I went through, because of me now being in a place where I could say I'm mature enough to make a better decision, I would never advise anybody to do it, ever. And I just don't think that a lot of women think about the situation from the perspective of the child and what they will also do to their body mentally and physically afterwards. That's just my opinion.
Yeah. I think there's a few lies that people are telling young women these days, and one of them, Bench Pearl, went on a really good rant about how we tell women that seek your career. Everyone should have a career. I mean, I have something that I'm doing. You have your stuff that you're doing, like girl boss, you know, go ahead, girl power. But this focus as if that's the most important thing in your life, like, and he put it this way, like, you can work your way, get to a law firm and stuff, but when you're on your deathbed, you're not going to be thinking about your billable hours or how you wish you could have did one more case, filed one more thing. You're going to want your children around you. So everyone who focuses on, you know, your career and stuff, as opposed to what's going to be really important at the end of the day. And Professor Jordan Peterson, he was on this one show talking to a female reporter and interviewer, and so he was talking about the importance of having a family. And so she was saying, well, I'm 38 and, you know, people keep asking me, when am I going to have a child? When am I going to do something? And she's like, but, you know, it's kind of like demoralizing in a way. She's like, I have a good career. I'm doing this. And he's just like looking at her, kind of glaring a little bit. And he's just like, life can get really lonely if you're alone at, like, you know, in your late 40s. And you look around and you don't have a wife and kids. And when you getting up there in age and you're like on the decline, you're going to wish that you had other people around you who were close like that. And so I don't, people kind of joke like he's red pilling her right then. But I mean, it's for her, I would assume it's a bitter pill to swallow. But it was such a good point. It is such a good point. And it's, I mean, I guess if you're an older woman, it's kind of hard to hear anyway. It was like, but you want to have a family, and some people have convinced themselves that they're better off without one. And maybe you aren't the motherly nurturing type. Maybe that's the case, but in some regard, you'll never know until you find out.
That's true.
Like my mom is not a typical nurturer, but she is nurturing, and she's very loving, and she's a great example to not just her girls, but all the women in the church.
She is.
And but she's not the one who hugs you when you fall down and you have a boo-boo or whatever. Like, my dad is the one who's quicker to cry, quicker to hug you than her. But she shows her love in like acts of services in sort of different ways. So, and her friends are like, I can't believe Isabel had all these kids. Like, they can't believe it. Like, she expected maybe she might have one or two or something. So you never know what position you're going to be in. And you don't know what you can survive until you go through it. There was this one woman who's on MasterChef a couple years ago. She talked about how when she was pregnant, she was living in a car in the winter in Chicago. And so, I don't know where her political affiliation, whatever, but I just know she was a young black woman. She was like, I don't know, in her maybe like 40s at that point in time. She had a few kids at that point, and she was married to a military man. So her life, she had a turnaround in her life. But if she had made different choices back then, who knows where her life could have been? Maybe she could be at the same spot. Maybe she could be further along. But the point is that she was willing to take that journey with that child and face the hardship. And hardship is hard for you when you go through it with your kids. And as a family, there are things that I've maybe opened up on here before about that I don't mind sharing, but I'm not going to go through the story right now. But that we all had to face at one point in time together. But it does affect you, and sometimes things can linger. But I think ultimately, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And you survived a great deal.
Through the grace of God.
I mean, you really did, and it's amazing that you put it all down on the page. I was really grateful that you went back and added more in there. That I thought it was necessary to tell that story, and even like telling it now here. Thank you to everyone who's watching. I know at least on our end, it looks like there's a bit of a lag. So I thank you, people who are still watching and people who are still sharing this, because it's an important story. And I just wish we could have real conversations about this stuff. And there's so much back and forth that the right and the left has when they're debating this issue. And in a lot of time with the left, it's like you just they want to leave the child out of it totally. But if you're adult enough to have sex, I think you're adult enough to acknowledge what you're going to do.
That is true.
But there's so many people who pretend otherwise. Like I said, there's so many people you'll debate and they're like, it's a fetus. I'm like, do you own a dictionary? Like it's an unborn human baby. Like saying it with disdain doesn't make it less real.
Right.
It doesn't make it less real. So I really believe from the story that I heard today, that you've all heard today, is just one of many examples. There was a story that I played earlier before, Quell came on, from a woman. She got her abortion, like, I believe it was the 70s. But, they told her different things, clump of cells, so on, dehumanize the child. Yeah. But the lie that your life will just go back to normal, there is no normal after that.
No.
And so that was like the biggest lie. And she said it affected her marriage, and she said the divorce rate is very high, but she said by the grace of God, they got through it. But she noticed, like, even her ability to bond with her children, the ones that she kept, was hindered. And she talked about how she would just get sad on Mother's Day.
Yeah.
And she did drugs and all kinds of other stuff, faced serious depression. But talking through her abortion and what she had done, she was able to heal, and she's able to help other women. And she talked about how, God wanted her to be whole, and God made her whole.
Yeah.
And so that's her mission that she seeks out with other people. I know mentally you said, you shed some tears today, but you say that, God has helped you through it and healed you through that hurt. Yeah. But that's still insane about the physical thing. I wonder how many other women go through the same thing. I've never heard that.
Yeah. I'm sure there's many more, just, they don't talk about it.
I'm sure. And if they do physically feel like that, and every woman is different, but I believe that there's a lot that's probably in common that's just unspoken.
Yeah.
But if that's the case, I wonder if that even contributes to people pushing back so hard on the issue. Because if you're feeling like your stomach is doing flips and you're having a traumatic experience talking about it, then you would probably backbite as hard and fast as possible.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That's given me a different bit of perspective on it. Gosh, Quell. I really thank you for
no problem,
being open and honest about this, about something that's so serious. And I do want to encourage everybody to go on Amazon and get this book, Desperation to Faith, to tell her story about going through this, and those tumultuous relationships we get too much into, but it goes into that, finding her self-worth and physical healings that she went through, and growing closer to the Lord. So I encourage you all to get this. It's a good read.
Great read. It's a great read.
And that cover is beautiful.
Yeah, she did a phenomenal job. I had so many people, reached out to me and was talking about, the cover itself, and then also just, even the content. People really, really enjoyed and have really been blessed by me sharing my story. And so I'm blessed and I'm thankful to just be used, for God to be able to use me to help, other women, whether young or older. There's a lot of things that I've been through starting at an early age that I'm sure many other women have gone through or maybe still be in, and maybe trying to figure out how to get out of it. What do I do? How do I overcome what I've been through? Or, how do I get out of where I am? And I believe reading my book will help, give you some idea and some insight of how to overcome. If I'm being completely honest, the core of it is having a relationship with God. But I know, building a relationship with God doesn't happen overnight. It's a process. It's something you have to be dedicated and committed to. Just like a parent loving on their child, from day one, that child being born, they commit themselves to being that loving, caring parent. And God does that with us. But we also have to take the time out to give back to him. Give him our time, give him ourselves, give him our communication. And in your time of doing that, you will find yourself in a place being healed, delivered, set free, and just a totally, different person. I am not the same woman that I was years ago. And I'm sure Christina and many other people that know me can say I am a totally different person.
I can totally say that. I can totally say that. But if you are a believer, you should be growing and maturing all the time. I feel like I'm not the same person I was last year.
Yeah. Or
the year before that, or the year before that.
Yes.
And it's not that like anything extraordinarily crazy that I was like doing something in the world or something. But we're always striving for perfection, but I believe that's actually just like a maturity.
Yes.
And you have to just, if you're stagnant, that's bad, but you want to make sure, if you're leaning to the Lord and continuously trying to find yourself through him, there's things about yourself that, your flesh is going to chip away.
Yeah.
And as you go on that journey. So I've definitely feel different about myself, but I'm proud of you. I'm so proud.
Thank you.
I know writing it all down has got to be therapeutic too.
Yeah.
There's this one young woman on TikTok who she was abused by someone that she knew for years, and she got pregnant and had a miscarriage. But she was very, very young, like early teens. When it happened. And so she ended up, she grew up, I think her parents are atheists, but she grew up, they are ethnically Jewish, and she ended up converting to Catholicism. And so she's an interesting person because she can read Hebrew, but she's like, Catholic. So, but she'll debate people all the time about, because when people want to bring up abortion, they'll bring up rape. And so whenever someone does it, she'll be like, you want to use this to make people uncomfortable, but this is a real thing that happened to me. And she said, she believed, she doesn't know what the sex of her child was, but she believes it was a girl, and she named her baby Rachel. And she, takes comfort and believes it's with the Lord, and she's found a way to cope with it. But I think people really need to talk about it.
Yeah.
Or they'll fester, and I guess they'll keep being extreme activists and trying to avoid the issue. But I believe there is healing for this.
Oh yeah.
And I advise everyone to try to find it, but you can't do that if you just kind of keep ignoring it. And I wish those doctors and the people who work at those clinics cared a little bit more about what's being snuffed out of the world in these women. These women. This is probably my last point, but people make the case that if we get rid of abortion, that all these women will just start having back alley abortions, and they'll say that those numbers used to be astronomical, but that's just not true. That's just a talking point. But I'm like, when people bring that up, it's so bizarre to me, because if you're saying that if we get rid of abortion, that there's just a slew of women who would just do that themselves and risk hurting themselves in that way, I'm like, what sort of mental state are you saying that women are in when they make this decision?
Yeah.
Because you're basically saying women are near suicidal.
Basically.
So if that's the case, then abortion shouldn't be easier.
Yeah.
They should be much harder to obtain, because you're saying women in that position who make that choice are mentally unstable.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's really a bizarre position to me. Really, really bizarre. So we just need to have honest conversations.
That's true. Starts with honesty.
So, Quail, I said I wanted to end my show on a quote. So, did you have I'll give you a second.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to read a scripture for us. But before we go, I want to thank everyone for being on. I do want to explain what happened when I was like, oh my gosh, my show stopped. So, I don't know, my mouse just went haywire, and I'm going to call out Logitech for a second, because they had a really dumb commercial that they came out with the other day, so I don't mind putting them on blast right now, I guess. But I had two screens set up, and one of them was just like going haywire, like in the web browser, typing all these numbers. It looked like The Exorcist or something. I'm like, what's happening with my computer? And so I moved my mouse, and then it just started like clicking off things, and then the screen disappeared. So that's when I was like, oh shoot, my broadcast is over. So I'm really, really sorry about that confusion and that awkwardness. And then I was like, oh, it's still here. But nothing too awkward happened. I'm just more embarrassed. I was like, oh shoot, it's gone.
And we were
and you're like, oh, really? But you guys were there for the awkwardness, weren't you? Yes, you were. Really quickly, the Logitech commercial. They put out a commercial with Lil Nas, who's the rapper who made the Satan shoes, by the way. And so they have a slogan, I guess it's their Pride Month thing, and they're like, to move forward, you have to defy logic. And I'm like, defy logic? What, like that you can't change your gender? Is that the kind of logic you're talking about? But I'm like, if you're a technology company and your name is Logitech, why would your slogan be defy logic?
Right.
That is the dumbest thing. It's so stupid. So I did want to talk about it, but now I've mentioned it, so there you go. I might go into depth a little bit more as we close out the Pride Month. And it's the 30th, right? Is that what it says? Is this the last day? June only is 30.
Yeah, only goes to.
It's the last day. It's the last day. Okay. Last thing to rant about Pride Month. Oh my gosh. So, please go to blacktnews.com. Check out content that I have there. I thank you guys so much for being part of the discussion today. If you guys would like to support, you can go to blacktnews.com/donate, or you can do so via PayPal, or you can do it via Cash App. There are, might think I'm in the studio and just streaming stuff, but there are costs associated with it, including like how I'm streaming, though. I have to figure out why this is lagging. But I appreciate all that you guys have done to support. I appreciate you watching and staying on, even through like the technical issue that I had today. And but if you would like to support, I'm asking. The Bible says you have not because you ask not. I am asking. So if you would like to donate, there are multiple ways that you can. I appreciate that. And please go to the website and check out some of the merchandise that we have there. There's some great stuff that I'm sure that you guys would love and you can get for someone else. Please go check out Quail's book on Amazon. It's a good read. It's a good read. Give it to someone you love. Give it to someone who may be struggling with this sort of things that she's struggling with bad relationships, with considering having an abortion. I mean, she went through the ringer, and you could hear it today that she would not have made the same decisions that she she made, and she stands today a changed woman and a more mature woman. And there's a lot of kids today who argue very, 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 very harshly. And I like to debate when I was younger too, but there needs to be a little bit more listening. A lot more listening from people who are younger. You need to listen to some people who have. Not everyone older is smart or wise, but you need to be open to maybe that your worldview is a little bit wrong. So please get her book, and you can check out merchandise that I have. I'm going to show this shirt again. I'm not the victim you're looking for, which is really relevant with so many people trying to push so much racial division today. Don't be the victim that everyone wants you to be. So, Sister Quill, I'm going to ask you to close out with your quote.
All right, my scripture for today is in Philippians chapter 2, verse 3. It says, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves."
And why exactly did you pick that one?
I chose this scripture predominantly because I thought about my mindset and where I was at 17 years old. I thought about the actions that I made and the different things that drew me to make the decisions, that I made. And it was out of selfish ambition. And I wasn't thinking about the child in the situation. I didn't think about the other human life that was a part of the situation. So I believe this would be a good scripture to share with everyone and help everybody to keep in the forefront of their mind, to remember not to be selfish and to think about others. That's in that scripture can go for many situations, but considering the topic that we were talking about and myself knowing at that time when I made the decision that I made, I was being selfish, I thought this scripture would be great.
Well, take that, progressive Christians who are pushing this stuff. Someone said, thank you for the stream and sharing such a personal story.
You are very welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much for watching. Please share this around. I appreciate you guys being part of the conversation. It's an important conversation, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. God bless.